Good afternoon, everybody. We'll just give it a minute or so for everyone to come in, and then we'll crack on.
Lucky we didn't go for a 5 o'clock kickoff on this event, Laura. With the big game this afternoon, I think we would have struggled.
I think so too.
Especially Anne-Marie, I know you've got the whole afternoon off.
Yeah, absolutely. No.
And you were glued to the TV last night, I'm sure, watching both games.
Yeah, what happened last night?
Did you watch any of it or not?
I didn't know.
It's a shame, because actually we were doing very very entertaining. Actually, it was a lot of goals going on last night.
Very good, very good. I'm more of a tennis girl, so I'm actually going to be going to Wimbledon next week, so I'm really looking forward to that.
Nice. It was good to see Murray hang in there last night. And actually, you never know, he might be there in the second week.
You never know.
What day have you got actual tickets to one of the main courts, or are you doing a day trip or whatever?
Yeah, it's centre court.
Nice.
Yeah, so hopefully the weather holds up. It's not looking too bad at the moment.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, I think we'll get started there. Thanks everyone for logging in today. Should be another interesting session with Zanda today. I'm first going to give a quick intro on Seedrs first for those who don't know who we are. And then if you're interested in our services, you can get in touch with us directly. And then after that, I'll give the word to Andrew. So Seedrs, so what do? We are an online platform for investing in the equity of startups and growth companies. So basically we allow investors to invest as little or as much as they like in businesses they believe in and share in their success. So we allow the investors to do that, but also, and this is probably more relevant to you, allow any ambitious business in all sectors to raise capital and build a community through an efficient online process. So you can essentially raise money with us, you can build a customer base, or you can do a marketing campaign all alongside a fundraising campaign. So in the meantime, if any founders would like to discuss fundraising with us, feel free to get in touch with Mark. Mark is our partnership manager at Seedrs, but we'll share his contact details in a follow-up email, and he'll be happy to set up a chat with you. But so for today, we have our fourth and unfortunately last session with a series of 4 with Zanda, who are an exec search platform who focus on the startup and scale-up space. But I think Andrew would be more than happy to introduce himself to you if you haven't met him yet in any of the other sessions. So without further ado, over to you, Andrew.
Thanks, Laura. Thanks for the intro. Yeah, really pleased to be here today. Quick kind of intros. So who are Zanda? And obviously some of the webinar guests and attendees will know who we are, but essentially Zanda supports seed to Series C startups to scale. So we support the founders and the VC firms with their portfolio, with key hires across finance, strategy and ops. So typically, we work with businesses both in the UK and the US. My co-founder is based in New York, I'm based in London. And we do cover kind of other major European hubs. So essentially we partner with founders or VCs on their growth aspirations and advise and headhunt the relevant talent or functional specialists they need to get to the next stage. We've obviously, this is the 4th of the series of webinars we've done with Seedrs. We have done some specific ones on building an appropriate board of directors, covering chair, non-execs and functional experts. We've covered the right finance leader and how to build kind of a forward-looking, insightful finance function. But today we're going to be focused on really key, well, one of the most important elements in a startup's growth journey is getting the people practice and the HR and talent function established and working appropriately. Clearly, startups can only scale and get to the valuations and the successes they need to with the right talent. It's the most important thing in a startup, and every founder we talk to, when they are reflective of what they've built as a business and their successes, they always put people and talent as the number one driver that's helped those businesses achieve what they can do. And on that note, we're really delighted to have Anne-Marie join us today as our special guest and our HR guru. So what we'll do a quick intro from Anne-Marie, and then we'll dig into some of the questions that have been put to us via people that are coming to this session, and also from what I know individuals would want to know. And there's a couple of polls on the way as well. So Anne-Marie, do you mind just giving us a quick overview of your background?
Yes, definitely. And firstly, thank you to Seedrs and Zanda for inviting me along today. It's a pleasure to be here. In terms of my background, just to share a little bit about me, I've been working in people operations for the past 20 years, and I've spent the majority of that time in the technology industry. I was very fortunate after leaving university to land a HR job pretty quickly. In fact, my second HR role was as a HR generalist working for a pan-European technology company. So I definitely caught the tech bug very early on, and that probably explains why I do what I'm doing currently. I would describe myself as a generalist, so I have expertise in most facets of HR. And I've worked with small leadership teams, large leadership teams around the world. In particular, spending a lot of time in Europe, Middle East and Africa, and also North America. And my role has been to really help those leadership teams build business strategy alongside people strategy. I've led various change and transformation programs, and helped on a variety of topics, from workforce planning to employee experience, organizational development, to name a few, at companies such as Google, Uber, Cisco, Tibco, and so forth. So I've had some very rich experiences there. In January 2020, I set up Workforce Buddy, which is a boutique people consulting business. And what we do is we work with startups and scale-up businesses to grow their team and leadership capabilities. And the way we achieve that is we work very closely with founding teams to ensure that we're putting in the right skills, systems, and strategies that will make sure that their team capabilities are able to meet the ongoing needs of their business as that business grows in complexity. So that's how we help.
Yeah, and what an eventful first year and a half you've had.
Yeah, I couldn't have predicted it at all. We're still here, which is great.
Still here, but also more important than ever on the basis of what's going on. And I know we'll dig into that in a bit more detail. And Laura, if we don't mind doing a couple of quick polls just to kind of get an idea of some of the audience, and maybe we can take down that kind of the slide for the event, that would be great. So what we're trying to get to here is just kind of where individuals and businesses are from a size perspective or stage perspective. There's obviously a lot of pre-Series A and kind of seed, pre-seed and Series A businesses on this call. So just kind of get a picture for Anne-Marie on the sizes.
Do you want me to share the results as well, Andrew?
If you could, yeah, that would be great. Yeah, so okay, so most are less than 5 or below 20, and then a few in the 20 to 50 range, kind of what we expected, I suppose. And then if we could do the last poll as well, just to kind of see, I assume that most wouldn't have a dedicated HR or talent resource, and the entrepreneur or the founder is trying to do that at the same time currently. But let's see.
Oh.
Yeah. Are those numbers what you'd expect, Anne-Marie? Because obviously, I guess 90% of the people on this have got less than 50 staff. So, you know, what ratios, is that kind of what you were expecting?
I do think that's the norm, especially if we're kind of talking about pre-seed to Series A businesses. I think, you know, probably the first hire would be a recruiter. Okay, the screen's come back now. Yeah, first hire would be a recruiter who might branch into more talent work, and so you normally hire a recruiter when you are clear that you're going to be growing and you know what that growth plan looks like, and you need to bring people on board. So yeah, not unexpected at all. But that doesn't mean that there isn't people decisions being made, even though you don't have a people team. So.
Well, yeah, I guess that's essentially the main reason for founding your business, because those decisions do need to be made, and your founders have got to wear so many hats.
Absolutely.
When do you normally engage with founders? What sort of the stages has Workforce Buddy kind of helped businesses so far?
It's quite varied. So we do everything from pre-seed up to Series C, really, and there might be some select projects beyond that.
And in terms of, obviously there's a host of founders on this call. What are some of the challenges that founders reach out to you with when they are responsible for HR as well as, you know, their CEO role, I suppose?
Yeah, sure. That's a good question. So it can be very varied, like depending on the size of the business or the stage of development. So on the one hand, it could be values work. If it's, you know, a pre-seed business, they could be asking questions around, you know, how can we design a set of values that are going to drive the behaviors that we need to make this team really successful. How do we embed those values? How do we bring them to life in a more meaningful way? It could be helping a startup create their very first people processes. So the ask might be, can you come and look at what we're doing around recruitment? How can we run our recruitment activities in a more efficient way that delivers better outcomes? It could be looking at the onboarding process. And, you know, once those hires are on board, what's the best approach to goal setting, setting expectations about the role and the deliverables, and so forth. Or it could be something around compensation philosophy. So, you know, beyond 12 months, how do we want to start thinking about compensation with a view to short-term versus longer-term incentives? And, you know, and how can we make the best of our budget that we have around that? How can we respond to what, you know, some of our higher expectations around growth and advancement? So it can be very varied. I'm thinking of other examples. It could be something around team dynamics. So can you help us as a team work more cohesively together and build an environment of trust where, you know, the team are really safe to speak up, to challenge the status quo, to really come together and challenge one another to have more diverse ideas and business solutions. A lot of it falls around manager capability, because we know our managers are really the guardians of the employee experience. So in that vein, it could be helping first-time managers transition into the responsibility of, you know, being there to support the needs of their direct reports, driving motivation, and kind of just having that mindset shift from individual contributor to now somebody who is responsible for managing the performance of and driving the engagement of others. So those type of topics, I'd say.
There's too many to cover today, but we will try and cover as many as possible. And I'm sure we'll cover a number of them. How do you help founders to think about their people strategy?
Yeah, so for me, the people strategy really stems from what it is we're trying to achieve as a business. So for most organizations, that would be looking at, perhaps their 3 to 5 year business strategy. If you're a much smaller business, like your outlook for, might be, based on the next 18 months, that might be your view on the goals and the deliverables that you need to execute on. So whatever that time frame is for you, kind of looking at like, what do we need to achieve in the next 18 months? What are we expecting in terms of changes in the market? How is the competitive landscape going to change? What's going to be going on that might be impacting how we do business and how we deliver our results? And I think once you start to lean into that forward-thinking conversation, then it gives you space to think about, okay, if the environment's going to be different in the next 18 to 24 months, and this is what it's going to look like, who do we need to be? How do we need to show up? What type of capabilities do we need to build to be successful in that new environment and taking on those new challenges? And I think once you start to have those conversations and you're clear about how things are going to change for you as a business, you can almost start to work backwards to say, okay, well, where are we now? What's the gap between where we are now and ideally where we would like to see ourselves and how we want to show up in the next 18 to 24 months? And then where the people strategy fits in is looking at, well, what are the people considerations that are important priorities for us to think about and solve for in order to make sure that we can rise to the occasion and we can execute and we can be successful in delivering our business strategy. So I think that's where it starts, and the people considerations could be, do we have the right skills in the business, or how are the skills going to change in 18 months' time? How do we start to plan for that now through various, learning and development interventions? Or, will we be hiring different types of skills in the next 24 months? So, or will the new environment impact how we organize ourselves around the work? If so, in what ways? How do we plan for that now? And so a lot of the people strategy will be around how do we make sure we've got the right skills in the business, so that's securing the right talent. And then once they're with us, how do we make sure that we're able to retain talent and also, make sure we hold on to our critical talent that are really going to be, on the front line, driving the execution of that business strategy. So that's how it all comes together for me. I can see you could ask the question.
No, it sounds like the founder and the founding team need to have a clear idea of what the next milestones are for the business, the growth trajectory, the competitive landscape. They need to have a picture, a holistic view of where the business is looking to go for you to be able to impart a people strategy effectively. Is that fair?
I think that's really fair. And, there's various degrees of which you can plan for that. There will be some businesses that are just, planning quarter to quarter. But, if you're not able to sit back at some point and take perhaps a longer term view, with your leadership team, then, the market sometimes happens to you and you're having to react to the market, which can cause more pain, lead to greater inefficiencies, and also costs. So, for example, if I'm thinking about the next 6 months and I'm hiring talent and skills based on what I need currently and for the next 6 months, but in 24 months, the skills are different. So maybe I'm hiring generalists today, but actually what's required in 24 months is a more specialist skill set. Then what happens to the people who have the generalist skill set? If I haven't proactively developed them so they can take on some of the responsibilities of the future, it may mean that who I start with are not in the business in year 2 or year 3. And so that, I think, can cause a lot of disruption. So you don't want to get caught out by changes in the market or changes to the business model that are going to impact how you operate.
It's really interesting. The last one we did was about building an appropriate board of directors. And it was all around reviewing what's your next milestone, in the next 12 to 18 months. Do you need to do a certain fundraise or an international expansion or a product launch? We reviewed kind of the growth trajectory of the business and also the background, the functional specialisms of the background of the senior leadership team, to work out where the gaps are. And it is kind of in line with what you've just described in terms of that functional specialism piece as well.
Yeah, that's really spot on. And I think, like, for a lot of businesses who are taking investment, almost to get that investment, you need to have a strategy or some idea of what the next 24 months look like in order to get the investment. So you already have your business strategy and your workforce plan. You've already thought about skills, and you've just been given the funding to execute. So, so some of that due diligence would have been done as part of that funding round when you're looking for investment.
And say that, you know, say a Series A raise is done or a Series B raise, and it's a reasonably significant one to enable the business to maybe not, you know, hyper growth scale, but to scale. How should a founder think about their value proposition as a startup, I guess, from a business or a culture to attract the type of functional specialists or talent that they need?
That's a really good question. Yeah, so we often refer to that as the employee value proposition. So for people outside of the organization, why should they join? For people inside the organization, why should they stay? And I think it's really important for growing businesses to be very clear on what that value proposition is, and be communicating what that value proposition is, not just as part of the recruitment process, but through, you know, your staff meetings, your town halls, etc., just to make sure there isn't a misalignment in expectations. The other thing to say around the employee value proposition is that it's not static, so it's continually evolving. And what might be true for year one in terms of what we're offering to employees might be slightly different in year two and year three. So it's important to keep on top of that, and, you know, lean into conversations to talk to your teams about how that might be changing. And that way, you know, your staff can make informed decisions about, you know, whether what's on offer works for them right now or long term, and they can make, you know, informed decisions as to whether they stay or not. Where I've seen the value proposition, you know, create a bit of disruption or a bit of friction with leadership teams and the staff is where we're not clear about, you know, what it is the company's offering. So as part of the employment relationship, it needs to be mutually beneficial. And so for founding teams, they might be clear to their in the hiring process that this is what we need from you, this is what we're expecting, but they also need to be able to communicate, and this is what's on offer. And we know that employees join organizations for a variety of different reasons. For some, it might be brand, it could be advancement, it could be, you know, mobility, it could be the opportunity to, you know, work in a new industry or disrupt an existing industry. And that might be why they join, but that might not be the case in year two. So a classic example of this is, you know, founding teams perhaps, you know, getting, you know, really experienced talent in some cases, expecting them to take a pay cut to join a new venture that's doing some really exciting things, and promising, you know, quick advancement through the organization. So come in today and do some operations work for us, and, you know, within 12 months, you know, perhaps you'll be the head of the UK. That's like a common story that we hear. And so people make decisions and sacrifices based on what they're expecting the value proposition to be. But we're making a lot of assumptions there, right? That the business might not grow sustainably in a way that allows the structure to grow. So we might anticipate that we'll be growing very quickly, but in reality, you know, there might be some pauses on that growth that means that, you know, maybe in year two, year three, we're not able to offer lots of people, you know, more senior roles because the structure just isn't there and the business isn't there in terms of revenue, customers, and so forth. And sometimes when there's that misalignment between expectation and, you know, the experience employees are having, then it can lead to a lot of disengagement, frustration, which can lead to a lot of toxic symptoms in the business that you really want to avoid. And I think how you overcome that is perhaps, rather than avoiding that conversation, is to lean into the conversation and have a mature conversation around this is what it is today, this is how we see it changing. Yes, there is a lot of ambiguity, but here are some truths that we know to be true, and the rest we're going to figure out together. But I think it's really important to be clear about the proposition.
It's very interesting, isn't it? Because with growth, with a hyper growth business, you can provide more opportunity for individuals to move around the business and to get kind of promotions and different roles. So that in some ways makes it easier, but obviously there's other challenges within a hyper growth business about always recruiting way ahead of the curve so you don't fall behind, and then people are overworked and actually leave because of that. And then you've got this piece where you've maybe sold the dream, and then the growth or the funding takes a backward step. I guess it's really important in those circumstances that if you're going to make key hires, don't go over the top with the number of key hires, so that you can still have some flexibility with the key person that you bring on board. Maybe you just bring on one person and it's a little bit broader. I don't know what your thoughts are on that when there's not a proven buy-in from customers, product market fit, or anything of those natures. That there's obviously, the more key hires you make, the bigger the risk what you're explaining might happen.
No, absolutely. And, you can only make the best possible decisions with the information that you have, right? And if it's a critical hire, you might want to make that a permanent role, but there's also lots of other flexible offerings in terms of freelancers, contractors, people who come on board on a fixed term basis until you're able to have a bit more certainty in the market. So you'll decide what the mode of employment is and what feels comfortable for you, bearing in mind your budgets and also some of the uncertainty that you're trying to bridge as well.
And you've obviously worked on the people strategy. You've maybe identified one or two key roles that need to be hired to help that business cope with increased demand, or to help with the next milestone that they need to kind of achieve. How do you help founders on that new hire in terms of approaching it and kind of delivering on it type thing?
Yeah, so I think as part of thinking about workforce planning, an important point of that is defining for yourselves what is a key hire at our company. And so it's important to frame what that looks like. And so for some companies, it might be a role where if somebody wasn't doing that particular activity tomorrow, then it would severely impact our ability to deliver to our customers. So we might call that a role that has is a single point of failure. So if somebody's not doing that role, literally there's a very negative impact on operations. It's going to skew the quality of how we're delivering to our customers. So single point of failure is something to look at, but also critical skills. So I would say deep expertise roles like maybe your CFO or your head of legal. Those roles require deep domain expertise a lot of the time. You can't just figure it out as you go. And so the fact that they're knowledge roles and they're based on a lot of the time around compliance, that would be seen as a critical role, just simply because if you don't have that expertise, then you can fall foul of different regulations and be operating maybe perhaps in a non-compliant way, which obviously is going to have a very serious impact on your business.
And onboarding, what are some of the kind of good advice for founders looking to onboard key people?
I think with the onboarding, you just have to be very conscious, especially if you've got very aggressive growth plans. You need to be conscious of the fact that you're bringing in lots of people very quickly who come with their own ideas around how the world of work works, and they'll bring their experience from their previous employers and they'll apply it to your environment as cues to how things are going to work here. And I think one of the important things you want to do in your onboarding process is be very intentional in communicating what's unique about your environment. So actually, how do we at company A organize ourselves around the work as opposed to maybe other companies? What does it take to succeed here? What are the behaviors actions that we recognize and reward, what does it take to be successful in this environment, and how we work based on our communication styles, how we like to collaborate, and then also like our value system as well. So you've probably got, most onboarding processes are around 3 months. I think in startups, they're probably like a week. So you've got a lot of information that you really want to be very intentional about sharing with that employee. So one, they can get up to speed very quickly, but two, they can work in a way that is very much aligned with the team so that they can work in a cohesive way as well. So there's a lot to get across in a short amount of time. And I think definitely in this remote world, you have to be very intentional, and some of the best onboarding processes that I've seen have really been able to balance that information sharing alongside, helping people to feel welcome, making sure that they are investing time, not just meeting with them about the work, but also creating intentional interactions with colleagues and other cross-functional stakeholders and teams, so that those people have an opportunity to connect, get to know one another, understand what's important to the new hire, how they like to work, so that they can integrate very quickly, feel part of the team, build that psychological safety, so they can, very quickly start to deliver their best work.
And obviously this onboarding piece in the last 15 months or however long has been completely flipped on its head, because even if you were going to be a remote worker or have flexibility 3 years ago, you normally, or most of what I've seen is that you'd still spend a heavy amount of the early stages in the office before then transferring to maybe hybrid. So yeah, that and also on those lines, what offices provide is that 4 walls of culture, of the not necessarily it's down to the name of the company blazoned on the walls, but it's their values, it's their way they have structure on certain days to do drinks after work or to start the week in a certain way. So are there any techniques that you've seen to help combat the loss of that culture, which has been defined by having 4 walls that everyone goes to?
Yeah, so personally, I've been very impressed with some of the onboarding process that I've seen. I think companies have been very creative, which is really great to see. And that they've managed to create this balance between work priorities, but also getting to know the new hire, helping them integrate, navigate the organization, and feel part of the team. I was listening to a podcast last week, and actually one of the CEOs talked about the fact that in their organization, for their interns, they tried to simulate the office environment by having all interns on a Zoom throughout the course of the day, who might be just working away in the background on mute, but could come off mute to ask a question, just like they might do in an office. They might tap somebody on the shoulder, and then they would leave the Zoom to attend other meetings, but then once they finished the meetings, jump back in. So I heard that last week, and I thought that was very innovative. And so it's just been very thoughtful, being more creative, very intentional about, what do employees need? How can we best support them to deliver their best work? And then looking at the technology that we have, and using that in the most effective way to drive those connections, to keep people informed, to ensure that they have lots of scope to provide feedback, to ask for what they need to deliver their work, but thinking about your employees in terms of their whole self. So what do they need to deliver their work, but also what do they need, just as a human being, to feel part of something. And so, yeah, so I think that there's more to come on that, basically.
There's obviously so much technology in advancements in how to make the remote working better. So obviously we've seen loads, but you're talking about those rooms where interns can be available to dip into different rooms at any time. Less glamorous, but the audit firms are doing the same. by having those kind of hubs on different projects. So I'm sure there's many technology advancements to come in that area to help those businesses that decide to go fully remote or have gone fully remote. One of the challenges with that though is and everyone's obviously encountered this, is it's so easy to start the day with a laptop open whilst having breakfast, and then work through lunch with a laptop on your lap, and then watch a Netflix box set with the laptop open as well. So how healthy is that, and how can organizations help to alleviate that in a certain way?
Yeah, so for me, it's about helping employees set boundaries around the work. So there is this phenomenon that, if we don't have the commute anymore, if we are, getting up in the morning, having breakfast and switching on our laptop, then we're working straight away. So as a direct consequence, maybe we're actually working longer hours with fewer breaks. And so I think it's down to, the founding teams to lead on this, right? And to, make sure that employees understand they're not expected to work continuously throughout the day, to hold their staff accountable for taking breaks, to making sure they take downtime to maybe have their lunch, or, to have 15 minutes away from their screen, because we know that, constant screen usage is not going to be good long-term for us. So I think founding teams, even in small companies, can help their employees set strategies around how they're going to navigate this new world, how they're going to create boundaries that keep themselves safe and well, so that we can really exploit the benefits of a more hybrid model. But if we don't consciously lean into this and mitigate for this, then we'll just burn out our teams. They won't be delivering more for us. Actually, we'll be burning them out, and they probably won't be delivering an awful lot at all. So it just doesn't make good business sense to not be more thoughtful about how we support employees around this new world of work.
Just playing devil's advocate here, I've got my kind of gut feel opinion on this. Are startups and scale-ups actually doing that though? And are they actually doing that? They're clearly not doing it enough, I would say, because I think there's going to be potentially a shock to the system in 6 months' time, 12 months' time. That's my gut feeling. But yeah, obviously you see this more than I do.
Yeah, I'd like to think that they are. And if they're not, I think that's a very short-sighted approach. Now that we are working in a more hybrid way, what that does is it opens up the door to, more global, diverse talent pools. And especially in the startup market, it's competitive. Like, there is a war for talent, and employees will, voice what they want with their feet, and whether they choose to stay or go. But, I think a lot of people, through COVID, have really enjoyed the benefits of working more flexibly. And that might not mean, remote working for everybody. I think each company needs to look at what makes sense for their particular organization, what flexibility means for them. And some, it might be remote working 100% of the time. For others, it could be a couple of days in the office, a couple of days at home. So whatever flexibility looks like for that particular organization, if they don't think about ways about in terms of how they can create that, then the talent, if they enjoy working in a more flexible way, are going to look for those opportunities. So it's going to become definitely a retention issue for startups, I think, over the coming year, and longer term for most industries.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more on all of those points. I think just from a personal level and from our business perspective, what's been quite interesting is as we've got used to kind of analysing how we individually work, it's become apparent that I'm less efficient if I work longer hours. I'm really good early in the morning, and more kind of decisive, and can plough through probably twice as much work as I could in the middle hours of the day. And there's people in our business that are night owls, and some that like to do, it's getting used to the individual's most efficient personality character to deliver. And if you can form a culture where you can be flexible around everyone delivering their best at their key times, whilst you've obviously highlighted some of these single trigger point roles where if they're not doing it at a certain time, that's going to have an impact to the customers. So clearly there's some things around timings there. But I just feel like if key senior leadership teams and roles that aren't in those roles that have to be done at certain times can operate in a flexible way where people are operating at their optimum, that's got to be a step forward, hopefully.
Hopefully that is a huge step forward. I definitely think it's a smarter way of looking at our resources of a business and how to get the best out of them, especially when we're relying on things like discretionary effort to really provide a competitive advantage for us. And when you think about it, we've been talking about the future of work for over a decade, and it's here now. So, personally, I think we should embrace that. It might be different for different organizations. Maybe not everybody's able to lean into this the way they want to. What has been reassuring for me is that most companies are at least open or willing to explore what the possibilities could be, even if they're not in a position to commit to them right away. And I think that's very healthy. For the majority of us, like as you alluded, the old way of working, didn't work for many of us. Like if I speak personally as well, like for most of my career, I've kind of structured my life around what I do for a living, which is probably something that I don't want to do going forward. So with that in mind, I'm probably going to make different choices based on, how I want to work in the future and what different companies can offer me. So there's definitely a changing of the tide. I think it coincides with, a change in the relationship as well of employer and employee. And definitely, if we've not learned already, it's really important that we think about that in a mutually beneficial way. And then also, how do we drive the best outcomes through our teams and making sure that they're healthy, happy, that they're in the right mindset to deliver, the best possible results from our business has just got to be a smarter way of leading, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think when this all kind of kicked off March last year or February, March last year, if the period of lockdown was significantly shorter, this wouldn't have been such a game changer. But individuals at all levels of seniority have had a sustained period of change, that those habits are ingrained and they've been in, they've enjoyed lots of those elements. And it's not a case of just going back to work as normal. And I think for key hires, new hires, and for retaining people, it's working out what are the motivations of those individuals. It might be that you one individual every Thursday, their best thing that they have in the week is actually seeing their mum for a coffee with the kids because they pick the kids up after nursery. And if that's 3 hours, but that's a game changer for them, but the rest of the week they're flying on all cylinders, it's an absolute no-brainer for the founders and the business to back that, in my opinion. And I'm sure that there's many examples of individuals that have taken up hobbies that are game changers. It might be yoga in the morning to start their morning or whatever it is. So I guess both of us just encourage people to think about that on an individual level, perhaps.
Yeah, I think that is probably the best way to go. And, we're going to make mistakes, like it's an iterative process, but I believe, that we are smart enough and capable enough to figure this out and to drive longer term the right outcome. So, we've got this, we can figure it out.
Yeah. You've obviously spent the majority of your career in the tech sector, really, haven't you? So, and in recent years, majority of the time in scale-ups and startups. How have you been you working and exposed to the diversity and inclusion space, and what are you kind of working on currently?
Yeah, sure. So diversity, equity, inclusion obviously is something that a lot of companies are thinking about, regardless of size at the moment, and how to create environments that really are able to make the best possible advantage of, diverse perspectives, backgrounds, and so forth. So I do think it's very much should be built into to the DNA of how we think about culture going forward. In terms of like, if you ask the company about their DEI agenda, a lot of the time you will hear what's not working, but they might not necessarily know how to go about fixing it. And I think some of the key components of, you know, having a successful D&I strategy starts with knowing, you know, what is it we're trying to achieve, just like any other business function. I think what's very specific to this particular agenda is also knowing what your starting point is. And that can be, you know, believe it or not, can be a hurdle for many businesses, because maybe they've not had the investment in the technology, or they've not made the investment for a variety of reasons in tracking what the current demographic of their workforce is. But you need to know what your starting point is in order to kind of figure out if you are indeed making progress once you start to be more intentional around your agenda. So that's something to think about. And so last year we saw a lot of self-ID campaigns where employers were saying to their employees, okay, we don't hold this information today, but we'd love you to tell us a bit more about your background, so we can use that information to determine what our goals should be in this area. And also we can have some very clear metrics that will allow, you know, both the teams and the employer to figure out whether or not we are doing the right things to drive progress. So I think understanding your starting point, having clear metrics around what it is you're trying to achieve, having the right leadership buy-in, but also being able to bring, you know, your frontline managers on the journey with you is super key to this, because your managers, you know, really the guardians of the employee experience. They create much of the touch points of employees, and as part of driving more systemic change and making sure that you are removing or limiting bias in a number of your different processes, you need to really, you know, have the support of your frontline managers, so that as they make real-time decisions about who to hire, who to promote, who to reward and recognize, who to allocate the work to make special investments in, that they're aware of some of their own biases going into that process, so they can try to mitigate those. So there's a big education piece around that, but also it will enable you to look at some of those systems, how decisions are made, and kind of create your own interventions or ability to challenge those decisions as they're made real. So we're really stress testing who you're promoting, why you're promoting, what does that mean for other people who are eligible, how you're thinking about your pipeline of talent, how you're developing them, so that you can drive more equitable outcomes for everybody in the business. Yeah. Does that answer your question, Andrew?
I think it does. I mean, it's probably worth a whole nother webinar, isn't it, that topic? Because it's there's obviously a lot to do and many things that you can do. So obviously, if anyone on this or watching this on record has any questions on that, feel free to reach out to Anne-Marie. Likewise on any of these topics, to Anne-Marie or myself. I just realised that actually we've got 10 minutes to go, and I said we'd leave kind of 15 minutes of Q&A. So I may have, I know we've got a couple of questions, so we may run out of time, but I believe, Laura, you're going to send a follow-up email through to everybody that's attended, and it'll be up on your record with our contact details. So hopefully we can connect on an individual level if required.
Yeah. Maybe there's a question from Gary that came in, and it's more about estimating a cost for a recruiter. So if you can maybe quickly touch on that topic.
Well, we could both probably touch on that. I think it really does depend on the level of seniority. If you're going for a board hire, and you're probably trying to find the best person in the market, then it's going to be more expensive on a search basis, and that's predominantly what we do. But happy to have a conversation on that. And I think it's also dependent on how much time that search firm needs to spend specifically on that hire. And if it's a reasonably straightforward search for that firm, and the time to deliver the shortlist is quicker than a really, really tricky one, then the fees will be less. But I think for kind of middle management and junior roles, the fees will be less and less. And obviously you've got the option, if it's multiple hires, to And long-term multiple hires, you've got the question around whether you bring in your in-house talent person or you use an external third party to do the talent role for you. But Anne-Marie's better placed than me on that area, so I'll pass the baton to
No,
you.
I think you actually answered that very well. The only thing that I'd add is, just think perhaps like just a bit more long term about what your recruitment needs are. So as Andrew said, which particular functions, what level, where you might need specialists versus generalists. And then, if you are thinking about bringing in like an in-house recruiter because you have some, you're going to be growing very quickly, and that means growing your headcount very quickly, then perhaps look at the functional areas where you're expecting a lot of that growth to happen. And then maybe look at, an in-house recruiting person who has got experience delivering to those functions. But you're most often going to need like a blended recruitment solution where even if you have an in-house person, because as Andrew said, if you're hiring for a board or if you're hiring into your C-suite or you're hiring a particular expertise that none of your founding team has experience of, there's a number of benefits that can be derived from working with a search or specialist recruiter. Basically, they will help you screen and get the best possible candidate, and can educate you as part of that process in terms of this is what the type of skill set and profile you should be looking for. This is how you get value for money. They can help in the assessment process as well. So I think it's often a blended approach.
And I don't want to sidestep the fundamental percentages and salary, and an amount. So that's not my intention. I think for a middle management junior role, you'd be charged probably somewhere between around 15% on base salary, and it could be a bit more, could be a bit less. And for a more senior hire, it would be nearer to, well, it would probably be above 20, or it would be 20. But what I would say is if you've got a recruiter that's delivered and you like, and you give them more roles, there's more flexibility to negotiate, because their time dedicated on your business will result in multiple hires, and therefore they can charge you a set fee or a lower fee percentage across multiple hires. So find someone you trust, and if they deliver, then back them. Obviously, if it's a really niche functional specialist, you need a market leading individual, then that person might not be relevant. But build long-term relationships, and don't use 3, 4, 5 recruiters. In my opinion, I think it just generates more work for you. I think with technology advancements, obviously I've been in recruitment more than 15 years, so there was no LinkedIn. You were sending CVs via fax, and you were building a list of individuals in an organization by calling them. That's not the case anymore. Everyone's got access to the same network to a certain degree. Last thing on hiring talent, I think always think about, because obviously the startup ecosystem is massive and has been massive for the last 5-10 years. But prior to that, people went down the traditional route of investment banking, or a law firm or an accountancy firm, or they go into a corporate grad scheme. And a lot of startups that hire from corporates, like a Unilever or a whoever, Sony, and one of the things that they hire doesn't understand is that they've been operating it as a marketing manager or head of marketing, and when they get the marketing director job, they've got this image of this is much more senior, which it is. But moving from a corporate to a startup, depending on how many employees there are, is definitely more senior, and you're reporting to a more senior level. But it's also more junior than you've ever been before, because you've got no one below you. And it's also broader, both sides. You'll be doing things outside of what your core role was before. So it's having a holistic understanding that you will be coming into a role that's more junior and scrappier, broader in terms of your skill set, and also more senior on occasions, which suits some people, but not all. So really assessing that individual on whether they would cope, and being honest about what that environment is going to mean for them, means you can probably help make the right decision more times than not. Sorry, I had to say that.
It's a really good point, right? If you're coming from a corporate, are you going to be able to easily make the transition to a smaller business where there is a lot less structure, less hierarchy, maybe a lot less process? And so you're working in an environment where you do need to be scrappy. You would need to be the type of person, I guess, who is energized from, figuring things out how you go, or building something from the bottom up. But not everybody's energized by that. Lots of people can do it, but especially if you've got small teams and you're making, key and strategic hires, you really want to go for the people that find that exciting, and because they're going to be the people that really thrive in that environment. They're going to get, energized by, just problem solving on the job, rather than, necessarily having things mapped out for themselves and not being frustrated by the fact that things are not mapped out. So I think, to build a business up, there's a certain behavioral and mindset and attitude that comes with that, and perhaps a slightly different mindset for employees that are brought in to maintain a business as opposed to build it from the bottom up.
There's still time for another question, I think. So we had one other question coming in. Is there any other guarantee that you have in mind for protecting from versatile hires aside from classic vesting? Not really sure what is meant with classic vesting.
I'm not sure if that's a trick question or not.
Yeah, I'm not sure what versatile hires mean. So I don't know
think maybe they might be alluding to kind of broader, more kind of used to kind of doing a bit of ops, bit of finance, bit of marketing. I think that's maybe where it's going, but
yeah, that's what I thought as well.
Right.
I think as you go through the stages, if you're 10 staff and you're growing, you're going to have to be really blended and really loads of variety and actually enjoy that. And when a business gets to 50, a different type of profile, then you need more and more bespoke functional specialists. And that individual that's hired, as the sixth hire, as this kind of bit of ops, bit of finance, bit of legal, depending on their background prior, needs, I think if they know they're going into this business and it's going to be 200 staff in 2 years' time, they probably need to know and have a conversation with the founders along that journey. Does that mean the CFO role? Does that mean the head of legal? Because they will need to move from this broad, really important jack of all trades to, I'm going to be a functional specialist, maybe with some of those jack of all trade bits below them, but not all of it all the time.
Yeah, and I just add to that quickly, just to say that, yeah, no, I definitely agree. And I'll just add to that to say, like, you need to be very thoughtful about what the right blend is for your particular team in terms of generalists versus specialists. And if you are hiring generalists, then one of the things to really look at is learning agility. So their ability to learn new skills as the business changes and the complexity of the organization grows. Because if you have somebody who's high on learning agility, they might come in with a specific skill set, but they'll be able to adapt that skill set, take on new responsibilities, learn the new skills that the business is going to need in order to scale. So learning agility for startups is something key that you want to look at as part of your recruitment process.
Wow. There we are, on time.
Yeah, there's actually one more question. Can I ask it as well, or do we?
Yeah, go on then. We'll charge over time.
It's a question from Rashmita. When is the right time to have a dedicated HR resource? And how can I support this requirement?
Yeah, so I don't think there's a one size rule for all organizations. I think if you have clear growth plans and you're going to be hiring X amount of new people in a short space of time, then it's really important to think about how you're going to onboard them, how you're going to set goals, like how you're going to walk through that expectation setting process and respond to their needs whilst they're here, which I do think needs the support of dedicated people resource. But it also depends on like what you're seeing around the business. So even if you're a team of 20, you might not be ready to hire a talent person outside of recruitment, but if you're seeing toxic symptoms, so, you know, maybe teams working in silos, or, you know, maybe there's friction around how people share information, you know, there's communication is coming top down, but not bottom up. That's leading to frustrations on the job, or people not working in a collaborative and cohesive way, then that might be a trigger for you to say, actually, we were going to wait, but actually now is probably a good time to get some HR expertise. And you might decide, like, we'll do that on an on-demand basis, like through a service like mine in the short term. So I would say it's very varied. There isn't a one size fits all, but it depends how quickly you're growing, how big the team is going to be, you know, in the next 12 months or so, but also like what you're seeing around you as well, and whether or not the environment is supporting people to deliver their best work or not.
All right, amazing, thank you.
Thanks, Anne-Marie, for joining us today. Really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me along.
Thank you both. Bye.
Take care, everyone. See you later.
Bye. Bye.